Hello, everybody. My name is Charles Head, and today we're going to be talking about the value of digital rights management, and we'll be focusing on the Help Systems product, Vera. I'll tell you who I am, and then we'll talk about the definition of DRM, digital rights management. I'll go over the history and an overview of Vera, the Help Systems DRM product. We'll talk about who benefits from DRM. We'll look at the components that make up Vera, and we'll see how it compares to Microsoft MIP. So a little bit about myself. My name is Charles Head. I'm a solutions engineer here at Help Systems. I've been with the company for 8 years. And ever since Help Systems acquired Vera, that has been one of my major focuses. So here's a definition of DRM, digital rights management. It's the management of legal access to digital content, meaning there's potentially a legal aspect to this that, there might be some kind of a court case going on and legal counsel has to communicate with each other securely, or something to do with finance or intellectual property. And the second part of this definition talks about the technology that allows this to happen. The technology really needs to manage the access that the users and groups have to that data. And now we come to our first polling question. The first question we have here is, what is your experience with digital rights management? So I'm going to launch that poll. So hopefully you all now have the ability to choose either I've heard of it, but that's where my experience ends. I know some concepts. I regularly use a DRM tool. I've administered, deployed a DRM, and I have deep expertise. Looks like we mostly have people that have heard of it, but get some people that are that know some concepts as well. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. We'll go ahead and close that and move on to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit about the history of Vera. It was originally a consulting job at the time. This is before 2015, before Vera was productized. There was a consulting group that was hired to develop a software for a customer. And at the time, there was digital rights management software, but it just didn't have the functionality that was needed by this particular customer. They wanted more abilities on how they could lock down those files. They wanted to be able to grant access to users, but not full access. And they wanted the users to constantly check in to make sure that they still have access. That way you could revoke access to files after the files left the building. And that piece of it was patented. It was patented as always on file security. In other words, the user that's accessing the file is constantly checking in to make sure they continue to have access. And then it was productized in 2015. That was the official launch of Vera. And then 5 years later, Help Systems acquired Vera. And now it is the Help Systems DRM product. And here's a little more about that active file security in the outer band of this graphic here. That includes that always-on security that we were just talking about, and likewise the access control list that you would find in the blue band is also a part of that as well. But let's look at the easiest thing to understand in this slide here. When we're looking at the Vera overview, the most important thing maybe is the AES 256-bit encryption. So at the center of the circle, we can see that the file was encrypted by the industry standard AES 256-bit. And we do highly encourage our customers and partners to do their own research, because the consensus out there is that that technology is simply unhackable, that you could put every computer in the world together and it still would never be able to decrypt that file. So only people that are on the access control list can access that file. And that's where the blue band comes in. That dark blue band is essentially where we're putting the list of users that have access to the file. And then finally, you have the active file security, which is available for certain file types where we can open the file within a supported application like Microsoft Word. And then we can do things like grant the user the ability to edit, but not fully decrypt or unsecure. Or we can grant them read-only access. Or maybe they can see the file, but they have to see their email address as a watermark. And there's many other things you can do like that, 19 plus different policy settings, as we call them. And then we see these arrows going to the cloud. So the cloud is where we install the Vera software. The Amazon cloud will have a virtual private cloud area where you can, or where typically we would install the software. That way the customer would never have to worry about software installation. There's virtually no configuration for the customer to have to do. So when we are ready for a proof of concept or a proof of value or a full rollout, typically it's about the easiest thing to set up you could imagine. We literally get our customer in the driver's seat and they are racing immediately because it is a SaaS-based solution. We manage the installation and upgrading of the software, and then that just leaves us needing to give the user an admin account so they can grant other accesses to people, their other users, and that's literally how easy it is to get going with a project. So what do these arrows mean? Well, the first arrow that's leading from the dynamic access control into the cloud represents the two things that are being communicated to the Vera cloud space, which is that this is the user that's currently logged into Vera. They either logged in using the website, the Vera website, or they might have logged in using the Vera client that they installed on their computer. And the other thing that's being sent to the cloud is this is the doc ID that goes with this file. Now this is important because we get this question a lot, which is that, well, based on this graphic, it looks like the access control list is in the Vera wrapper. It's part of the file now, and that is not the case. We never put anything in that wrapper that's of significance to the customer other than one thing, and that's the doc ID. The doc ID is a string of letters and numbers that goes along with the file and the key that decrypts that file. And you can't spoof it. You can't go into the HTML and change the doc ID and get some different access. So that doc ID is only going to go with the key that goes with that file. So you can't trick it into giving a different key. Any other key is not going to work to decrypt that file. So the website or the Vera client is sending two things to the cloud. This is who's logged in, and this is the doc ID of the file they're trying to access. And then the cloud knows who has access to what. So then the cloud answers back either, no, this user does not have access, tell them they don't have access, give them the option to ask for access, or the Vera cloud delivers an encrypted key down to that user's website experience or the client software that they have installed, and of course the user would not have access to this key. It's going to be encrypted in memory, and likewise the file will be decrypted in memory and re-encrypted. And assuming we're talking about active file security, at that point the user will enjoy their access that they've been granted, but they'll never actually have access to the decrypted file or the key that goes along with that file. All right, let's look at some of the ways that the Vera is used. One of the main ways we can see in this first box is that the users can right-click on files to secure them or manage access. And I'm going to come back to that one because I think that's a great way to understand how Vera works. So when I show you that, keep in mind that it's going to be pretty similar for these other options here. The next one being that you can encrypt files that are attached to an email. And then you can choose what policy to give the recipients, and then anyone who is in that to field of the email will then get access. They'll be added to the access control list and be granted the policy that you assign to them. Or as an alternative, there could be an automated process that automatically encrypts the attachments and gives access to certain people. And that's something that can be configured by the Vera admins. The third box shows that we can automatically secure files that are dropped into local folders on your hard drive, or SMB shares, or SharePoint and the files in Teams and OneDrive that are actually SharePoint in disguise, as well as Box and Dropbox and other areas. Next, we can see that there's this option to view the file and encrypt it within the browser. So the view in browser and edit in browser options allow the user to be able to access supported file types within their browser, meaning they don't have to install the Vera client. And they can even edit the file, like if it's a Word document. The application, the web-based application that would be happening in the background is actually only Office in that scenario. And then finally, we have the reporting that goes along with Vera, meaning the admins can see all sorts of different things analytics-wise, and even the file owners, that is people that have encrypted files, they also can track their own files, meaning they can see who has access to their files, who currently has access, did they actually utilize that access, and if so, when and where were they located at the time. All right, so let's take a look at how that right-click secure works. Here we have a computer where I have some files that are not encrypted, and then I have a file that is encrypted with Vera. You can see that it's got the HTML extension. Even though it's a Word document, it's got .html, unlike these unsecured files, which are still .docx. And then another difference, you can see that this one has the Vera icon overlay, whereas these don't. And also, if I were to right-click on an unsecured file, then I've got Secure with Vera as an option, whereas when I right-click a secured file, I get these other options: Unsecure, Manage Access, or Details. And all of this, the icon overlay, the right-click options, those are all thanks to this Vera client you can see is installed, and Bob is currently logged into that. It's a tiny little application that can be installed right from the Vera website. It's very easy to find, whether you're going to the landing page because you got a secured file, or if you're going to the Vera tenant website, there are many places where you can download that client. So let's see what happens when I try to secure this file. I'll right-click on it. I'll click Secure with Vera. I get this Vera dialog box that allows me to just simply click Secure. I don't have to do anything at this point except click Secure. Or I could give access to a person, a domain, a group, or anyone. Those are the four subjects, the four kinds of people that you can give access to. So I'll leave it on person, which is typically an email address, and I'll give access to my help system's email address. And the access I'll give my help systems address is the view in browser only. And when I hover over that policy, you can see a peek as to the combination of the 19 different policy settings. One of the things that we can see here is that it will have a watermark, and it will allow me to view the file in my browser, but not edit. I won't be able to edit the file in the browser. So I'll choose view in browser. I'll click secure. Now watch this file. This is the file that we're currently securing. It will jump. So I'll click secure. And you might have noticed that it seemed to move from here to here. And the reason why is it had the original version of the file had to be deleted, and then the secured version of the file had to be written. So that's why it appeared to move. And if I were to open up a web browser and drag the file into the web browser, then that will simulate what would have happened if I didn't have the Vera client installed. Because if I just double clicked on that file, it would have opened up in my default web browser, and then it would have asked me to log in. Now at this point, it's giving me an option since I have the Vera client installed. It's saying, well, why don't you use the Vera client? And I'm going to say, no, I want to use the web browser. I want to show everybody what would have happened if I had stayed within the web browser. So I'll click View Secured File. And since I was already logged into the web browser, well, no, I wasn't logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll log in with my charles.head account. So that's one of the first things that Vera needs. It needs to know who you are. It needs to make sure that you can authenticate. And now it grants me the access to the file using the view in browser experience. And it's got my email address all over the place as a watermark. And notice I can't update this file. I can't type anything here. If I was able to edit this file, we'd actually have a button here called Edit in Browser. So this shows I only have the view in browser access. I'm going to put this on the right. And then keep in mind, this is Charles in the web browser, but over here in the client is Bob. So when I right click on this file, that's actually Bob right clicking on the file. And so if Bob goes to manage access, Bob can see where he gave Charles that access. So there it is. There's Bob as the owner of the file. There's Charles with his view in browser only. Once again, this is Charles on the right here. So watch what happens when Bob hovers over this revoke access button and then clicks it. It's going to confirm, do you really want to revoke access from Charles? Yes, let's confirm that. And now hands off the keyboard, hands off the mouse. We'll just see what happens. I'll kind of talk this through a little bit. There's going to be a little bit of a delay, but what's happening is on the right, Charles's web-based experience is constantly checking in to make sure that he still has access. So any second now, that latest check-in is going to get a denial. And the Vera tenant in the cloud will say, no, Charles no longer has access to this file. So let's go ahead and revoke his access. So any second now, we'll see that access get revoked. A little longer than normal. And we seem to be having a bit of a hiccup here. Let's see what happens if I refresh this view. View secured file. So I'm now getting the you don't have access to this file. So that's a little unusual. I can't say I've ever seen it take that long. I finally just nudged it. But if I at this point, if I try to use Charles's login to request access to the file, you can see the request was sent, meaning the Bob over here as the file owner either got an email or he could go into his dashboard inside the Vera tenant and see that there's a request pending, which he can use to easily approve or deny this request. And similar things would have happened with these other options. So whether it's automated or the user is manually granting access, that's generally what's happening, is that somebody is getting some level of access and as they're being added to the access control list, and then that allows them to use that access within a supported application if they have the client installed or in the web browser with the view in browser, web edit in browser. So next we'll talk about the file types that are supported for policies, meaning supported for active file security. That is the ability to grant some level of access that's not full unsecure, granting read-only or view with watermark, view in browser, edit in browser. Those are all policy settings, meaning we have to grant someone a policy, which is a collection of policy settings. And in order to do that, the file type has to be supported for policies. And only the file types that we see on this list are supported. And the reason why they're supported is because these file types will open in the respective application. So for instance, .txt somehow it didn't make it on this list. So oh, I'm sorry, there it is right there. So TXT is supported in Microsoft Word. So what that means is that normally, like if it was an unsecured file and you double clicked on it, double click your TXT, it's going to open up in Notepad typically. But once you've got the Vera client installed and you get a secured version of a TXT file, at that point it will open inside Word. And then you'll have read-only access or whatever the policy setting is that's assigned to you. And so all of these supported file types are supported because they will open in the respective application, and then you'll get that access within that application. If we can't open up the file within a supported application for Vera, then that means it's not going to be on this list. The file type will be what we call an access control file type, meaning we can still secure the file, but we can't give a policy to the subject. We can add any of those 4 subjects to the access control list: users, groups, domains, everyone. But those users on the access control list will have the ability to unsecure the file. So once again, if they're not on the list, they have no access. If they are on the list, they have full unsecure if it's a file type that is not on this list here. So let's talk about who benefits. Who are the verticals for DRM? There's manufacturing and pharmaceutical. Both of them have a great need to protect intellectual property. And that goes for the entertainment business as well. So we could have easily put entertainment on here as well. We've got a lot of big customers in the entertainment business. So manufacturing, pharmaceutical, and entertainment all have a great need for protecting intellectual property. Like I said, we had that famous artist who never had to decrypt her music as she was reviewing it. She would get secured files and she would review it, never leaving that secured state. Then we have the importance of protecting financial documents and contracts, like you find with financial and banking, insurance, law firms. Like if you're having to provide information to opposing counsel, maybe you'll want to make sure to leave it secured and monitor what access they've used, so that they can never decrypt the file. They can only leave their little breadcrumbs in your audit trail. And then when it comes to healthcare in particular, there's HIPAA laws, and across all those industries, you've got to protect personally identifiable information, especially if you've got a regulatory compliance that you're required to follow. Like for instance, with GDPR, the Europeans are very serious about protecting PII, and if you're an American company that handles a European's information, then that's a concern. You really need to protect those files. I would like to encourage everybody to check the vera.com website, because there's a lot of important information that we're not going to have time to cover here. So check those links at the top, like why Vera, product, solutions, but also scroll down on the homepage like you see here. I've scrolled all the way down so you can see at the bottom of the page is just a peek at the many, many awards. So in order to see the full list, you have to click See All, and then you'll see this seemingly never-ending list of awards that Vera has won over the years. And then at the bottom right, there's a bot in case you want to go interactive. And all of this is available to you without having to log into this website. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits that our customers take advantage of. Sharing data with confidence is a big one. The confidence that you have when you secure a file, and you know that if it's lying around somewhere, you don't know who has access to that drive, or if you're giving it to somebody, you're giving somebody that file, and now it's completely left your environment. You no longer have possession of that file. It's out there. With Vera, you can be confident that the AES 256-bit encryption is only going to be able to be decrypted by someone that has access. So it is truly a mobile lockbox. And yet, Vera is transparent. In the second bullet point, you can see that you don't have to change the way you work, that your workflows will not be disrupted. Vera fits right into typical workflows, whether or not we're giving someone an easy method to grant access, Or maybe you're unifying everything with classification. We could talk about how Titus fits into this. Instead of having people understand how Vera works, you could just simply um, allow them to classify the file, or maybe even that is automated. Um, the next thing I'd like to talk about is that you can easily grant and revoke access in real time. So that typically what you'd find if somebody revokes your access, then within seconds you'll actually see the access get revoked on your screen. Data-centric protection anytime, anywhere, that's a nod to the fact that we do have protection that's special for each application, that there's going to be certain things that are unique to that application, and we take advantage of those features. And those features are like I said, there's more than 19 of them. I say 19 plus because there's 19 different policy settings, but some of those settings have settings within them. So time bomb is a perfect example of that. Time bomb means that after a certain amount of time, the person loses access. And the subsetting there is that you can choose whether that time bomb timer starts when you grant them access, or should it start when they start enjoying their access. And then finally, we can track the users. We can see who has accessed the file and the whole paper trail. In fact, let's take a look at that. You'll remember that I granted access to Charles. Charles accessed the file, and then we revoked Charles's access. So let's go to the Vera dashboard, and we'll see that it timed me out. So let me go ahead and log back in here. And then I'll go to Files, and there's that file that we were just looking at. And notice that with either Bob or Charles's access, Bob with his owner access and Charles with his admin access, any of those kinds of users can see the access control list without needing a copy of the file. So you can see I was able to just go to the file. This is not the actual file. I can't download this file from here, but I can go to the access control list. I can see no one currently has access because I took Charles's access away. And then I can also go to the activity log, and we can see that full paper trail from the moment that Bob gave Charles his access, and Charles used the access, and then Bob revoked the access, and then now Charles is getting access blocked. And then if we go to access locations, we can see where in the world Charles was when he accessed that file. Now we're on to our next polling question. The question is, how can help systems help you? And we've got some multiple choice here. I've just opened the polls. One choice is I'd like more information about Vera and DRM. Another is you'd like a demo. Next, you could choose that you'd like more info about maybe other data protection products as well. You might be interested in a DLP or a classification. And finally, I would like info on training and services, and there seems to be a lot of interest on that one. All right, thanks everyone who had joined the poll there. We'll go ahead and move on. And now let's talk about how Vera compares with the Microsoft offering, which is RMS, Rights Management Services. With Microsoft, you cannot buy RMS. So right off the bat, we've got a major differentiator. Help Systems will sell you Vera all by itself, so you don't have to purchase any other product. Whereas with Microsoft, you have to acquire Azure Information Protection, AIP, which is classification plus DRM. But you can't buy AIP by itself either. You have to buy MIP, Microsoft Information Protection. So MIP includes AIP, which includes RMS, and MIP also includes DLP, including Endpoint DLP, which is a direct competitor to the Help Systems product Digital Guardian. So in order to really be able to do a proper bake-off between Help Systems and MIP, then you would really be pitting MIP against, say, Titus for classification, plus Vera for DRM, plus Digital Guardian for DLP. And only then would you really be able to see how the three products compare to MIP. And what you'll find is that you can do everything that you can with Microsoft, those three products, RMS, AIP classification, and MIP DLP. You can do all those things with Microsoft, but they're not nearly as functional as the Help Systems versions of those products. Vera has many more things you can do, and another differentiator there is that you can revoke access to one specific user, whereas RMS is not friendly in that area. You typically will have to revoke access from everyone and then reissue the file, and you don't have all the different policy settings. And also the DRM, the Vera, sorry, the Microsoft RMS is one of those things that's kind of just forced on you as part of the classification. Whereas with Titus classification, you could use it independently with Vera if you want. They give you the option of separating the two, unlike Microsoft, whereas everything's rolled together. And then getting on to Titus, Titus is a much more advanced classification system than AIP. Help Systems also acquired a company called Bolden James, and Bolden James also is far superior to the Microsoft classification. Microsoft is very limited to the options you have when it comes to classification, whereas Titus and Bolden James give you full control over what those fields and values look like, and you can have as many as you want, and they can be internetworking with branching fields and decision trees, if you like. And then when you compare Digital Guardian DLP to the DLP that comes with Microsoft, there's truly no comparison. Digital Guardian is commonly thought of as being the best in the business when it comes to endpoint DLP, and it's got a far superior discovery engine to go along with that. So just a little bit more about Vera and its mobile lockbox, as I like to think about it. When you secure a file with Vera, that file is a mobile lockbox that'll snap shut on somebody if they lose their access. They have to be able to log in to be able to unlock that box, and that box is mobile. But then we also see something on the right that's interesting. It's a little bit of a nod to Titus, because Titus apparently has tagged this mobile lockbox with both a machine readable and a user readable tag. And that is a relationship that way predates the acquisitions of those two companies. Titus and Vera were both acquired by Help Systems in 2020. And years before that, Titus and Vera built integration with each other. So there's a long-standing partnership there. And that's why only Titus can properly tag a Vera protected file. And when I say properly, I mean without some kind of a trick. Like some products out there will say we have classification, but you find out that it's not really classification at all. They're either keeping track of files in a database, or maybe they fingerprinted the file, or maybe it is something that's a little more like classification, but it's alternate data stream. Whereas what Titus can do is actually place the metadata inside the file, because Titus has what's called an adapter that informs Titus on what the content of a Vera protected file is. So Titus knows exactly what to expect when it opens that file. It knows exactly where to put that tag, and it knows exactly where to read that tag if it ever needs to later, which can be extended to downstream products like Digital Guardian. So to piece it all together, let's say that you want to give something the ultimate protection, and you might think to yourself, well, wait a second, I thought Vera was the ultimate protection. We've protected the file. Now it doesn't matter if it leaves the environment. Well, that's true, except that the person that needs to access that file still needs to get a copy of that file. Vera will not deliver that file to them. Vera is not managed file transfer. It's not a repository. We do have products like Go Anywhere that we would love to talk to you about if you have interest in that area, but Vera is not the product that saves files. Vera never writes your secured file to a disk ever, meaning you cannot get the file from Vera, and if you want to give someone a file that's been protected by Vera, then you have to be the one to consciously email them the file or send them the file, however you want to send it. Vera doesn't care how you send them the file, but you have to do that, and the person accessing the file needs to receive a copy of that file. So for certain files, you might want to give that file an extra layer of protection and say, this file is so volatile, it's so important, we not only want to encrypt it with that uncrackable encryption and only give certain users access in the access control list, but we also want to stop that file from leaving the environment. And that's where Digital Guardian and Titus can come in, because Titus can tag that file in the HTML wrapper so that Digital Guardian does not have to decrypt that file. And we can do other things. We can get more complicated. We can have, say the encrypted part scanned, but without having to get into those more complicated use cases, we can simply tag the file with Titus. And now Digital Guardian knows to protect that file without having to decrypt that file. And now you've got the ultimate protection. Digital Guardian stopping the file from moving out, and Vera stopping unauthorized users from being able to access the file, just in case they do happen to get a copy somehow. And now we'll open up the floor to questions. So if anybody has any questions, then please put them in the chat. So we have our question. So the question was, how do users manage keys? And this is something I'm glad is being asked, because it's such an important thing. We get this question all the time because our prospects are often used to products where the user has to somehow take part in key management. So it's definitely a great thing to really drive home the fact that Vera users never have to touch keys. As a Vera user, whether you're encrypting the file or if you're accessing the file, you simply never have to touch a Vera key. All that key management happens in the background. And likewise, the access control list is not saved in the file. All of that occurs in the cloud. So so what that means is that it's very easy to use. The users don't have to manage keys. All they have to do is just be logged in and use the functionality. That's very user friendly. So I'm not seeing any more questions. So I will go ahead and spend just a quick minute showing the Vera components. This is something that we were hoping to have a little bit of time for. So I'm going to show this slide right here. So this is the full list of components that we commonly talk about. Maybe the most important ones to know about from this slide are the ones at the top here. Well, actually, before I talk about the components, there was a question here. What is the average time to deploy digital rights management? We find that to be practically instantaneous. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the tenant can be acquired within usually a day or two. That's really just comes down to here's your URL, here's you can go ahead and try logging in, and then when they use their email address to log in, they can reset their password. And then now the user number one is logged into the Vera tenant with their admin access. They can install the client, which is maybe a minute install, super easy install. And then that person is immediately starting to use Vera, and then they can add more users, which takes minutes, and then those users can do those same things. Once again, just taking minutes. So where things get interesting is when you add connectors. So this question is a good segue to this slide, actually, because typically we're talking about something that's very easy. The onboarding is as quick as you can possibly imagine. It really ends up becoming more of a question of how to use Vera and learning how to use it. So that might take a little more time, but even that is very, very easy. So it's really only when you get into these connectors that things get interesting. So I'll just quickly tell you the Vera client is the thing that you install on your computer so you can get the right-click option. And that client is for Windows, Macintosh, iOS, and Android. And it's amazing because then you can do things like access encrypted files and open them up in places like AutoCAD and Acrobat. So lots of different supported applications as you saw on that other slide. Another important component is the Vera tenant, and that's the admin portal. So it's a website where admins can go and change settings, give people different roles and accesses, and even users can access it, but they just won't have all those admin features available to them. And then there's the conversion connector. And the reason why that connector is different is because it comes by default and it's SaaS based typically. And so we don't really count it as a connector. It's, usually when we're talking about connectors, we're talking about on-prem connectors, and this would be in the cloud. And what it does is it's necessary for view in browser and edit in browser. So we're going to give you the conversion connector by default. You don't have to pay any extra for it. And so if we're saying that you can have a connector with this package, for instance, then that conversion connector is not what we're talking about. We're saying you can add one of these other connectors. And probably the most common connector that people will add is the share connector. And that's what allows files to be automatically secured when they're dropped into places like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Box, Dropbox, SMB shares. Notice I didn't say local folders because the local folder is actually, the files in the local folder can be automatically secured with the Vera client. So no need for a connector for automation on local folders. The directory connector is also commonly deployed because that's what allows your passwords to be synced with Active Directory. In other words, allow Active Directory to manage your Vera password. And also you can sync groups. So you could have a Vera group that's synced with an Active Directory group. And that way you're managing your Active Directory people with Active Directory, but you can still bring in external people to the Vera version of the group without having to add them to Active Directory. So it gives you a lot of great options there, a lot of flexibility. And then there's the key store and the mail connector. Those are not as commonly deployed. The key store is if and it comes with a key connector because you have to have an on-prem key store with a key connector that would connect to the tenant. And that's if the user wanted to have the keys on their own box. But as yet another option, they could purchase their own virtual private cloud from Amazon, in which case there would hardly be a need for a key store since the key store is typically built into the tenant. You would only need a separate key store if you wanted it to be on-prem as a separate server. And then finally, the mail connector will use MTA rules to redirect certain emails and then automatically protect the attachments as they're passing through the gateway. All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions and we're at the end of our webinar. So thank you so much, everybody. I'm just gonna go ahead and show you one last slide here. And that's the thank you for joining us slide with the web address for Help Systems, www.helpsystems.com, and also the email address, which we highly encourage you to reach out to us at this address, info@helpsystems.com, and we will definitely be happy to work with you and help you with your questions, do some consulting, and set up a demo if you like for any of our products. So thank you so much, everybody. We'll go ahead and end it there, and I hope everyone has a great day.